From the outside, nothing looks unusual. You're sitting quietly, walking through a supermarket, waiting in traffic, smiling through a conversation. But inside, your thoughts haven't stopped moving for hours. If you've ever felt like this, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Project Human, where every week we explore the hidden psychology behind what makes us human. Now let's find out why the mind thinks it has to keep thinking. People often call this overthinking, as if the problem is simply having too many thoughts. But that explanation has always felt incomplete. Because if thinking is supposed to help us, why does it sometimes leave us feeling even more confused? Why does searching for answers create even more questions? Why can some people let things go while others carry one small moment around for days, weeks, or even years? Maybe the real mystery isn't why some people think so much. Maybe it's why the mind believes it has to. Because beneath every racing thought, every imaginary conversation, every sleepless night, the mind is trying to solve a problem it believes is keeping you safe. It just doesn't realize that some questions can't be answered by thinking longer. And once you understand why, you may never hear your own thoughts in quite the same way again. If thinking so much leaves people exhausted, why does the brain keep doing it? At first, the answer seems obvious. Maybe some people simply worry more than others. Maybe they're naturally anxious. Maybe that's just who they are. But the human brain has a very different explanation. Most of the time, your mind isn't trying to make life harder. It's trying to make life safer. Imagine you're walking home late in the evening. You hear footsteps behind you. Without even thinking about it, you glance over your shoulder. Not because you know something is wrong, because you don't. Your brain has learned that uncertainty deserves attention. Most of the time, that's a good thing. It's one of the reasons human beings have survived for thousands of years. The brain is constantly asking one quiet question: am I safe? The problem is that this system doesn't only react to physical danger. It also reacts to emotional uncertainty. A friend reads your message, but doesn't reply. Your manager says, "Can we talk tomorrow?" Someone who usually sends long messages suddenly replies with one word. Nothing has actually happened, but your mind doesn't like empty spaces, so it starts filling them in. They're upset with me. I shouldn't have said that. Something has changed. Then something interesting happens. The first thought doesn't satisfy the brain, so it looks for another explanation, then another, as if the next thought might finally bring certainty. Notice what's really happening. The brain isn't looking for bad news. It's looking for an ending. It wants the story to make sense, because an uncomfortable answer often feels easier to live with than no answer at all. That's why overthinking can feel so convincing. It doesn't sound like panic. It sounds responsible. It whispers, "Read the message one more time. Replay the conversation again. Maybe this time you'll notice what you missed." For a few seconds, that feels helpful. It feels like preparation. It feels like solving a problem before it gets worse. But there's one question the brain almost never asks. What if this isn't a problem that thinking can solve? Because some questions aren't answered by more thoughts. They're answered by time. And while the brain keeps searching for certainty, it quietly builds something else instead. A loop. The same questions, the same memories, the same invisible journey. Over, and over, and over, again. Thinking isn't the enemy. In fact, it's one of the greatest things the human brain can do. It helps us solve problems, learn from mistakes, plan ahead, make sense of the world around us. Without thinking, everyday life would be much harder. So the goal was never to stop thinking. The problem begins when thinking stops moving. Imagine you're driving home after work. You've made the journey hundreds of times before. But this time, your mind isn't on the road. It's replaying something someone said earlier that day. Did they mean it like that? A few minutes later, you're still thinking about it. Then you realize you've driven past your turning, not because you weren't paying attention, because your mind was somewhere else. That's what overthinking often feels like. Your thoughts are moving, but you're not getting anywhere. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it rumination. It sounds complicated, but the idea is simple. Instead of helping you move towards an answer, the mind keeps circling the same question. It replays the conversation. It rewrites the memory. It imagines a different ending. Again. Then one more time. From the inside, it feels useful. After all, you're thinking, surely you're getting closer to understanding what happened. But have you ever noticed something strange? Sometimes you think of the perfect reply 3 hours after the conversation has already ended. Sometimes one awkward moment follows you into the shower, into the supermarket, even into bed. By the end of the day, it feels much bigger than it did when it actually happened. Not because the moment changed, because your attention kept returning to it. Every time the brain revisits the same memory, it quietly tells itself, this must be important. So it places that memory back at the front of the queue, ready to be examined all over again. That's one of the quiet traps of overthinking. It promises clarity, but often, it only creates repetition. The mind mistakes movement for progress. It keeps whispering, one more thought, one more replay, one more what if, as if relief is waiting just around the next corner. But relief never arrives, because this was never a puzzle with one missing piece. It was a wheel that quietly forgot how to stop turning. If that's true, then another question appears. Why do some people get caught in this loop so easily, while others seem able to let things go? The answer doesn't begin with personality. It begins much earlier than most people realize. By now, another question begins to appear. If overthinking is just the brain searching for certainty, why doesn't everyone do it in the same way? Imagine two friends sending exactly the same message. Hours pass. Neither of them gets a reply. One puts their phone away. They're probably busy. The other keeps checking the screen. Did I say something wrong? Why haven't they replied? Should I send another message? Same situation. Completely different experience. Why? Because the brain doesn't react only to what's happening today. It also reacts to everything it has learned before. Our minds are constantly asking, what does this remind me of? For some people, life taught them that mistakes had consequences. For others, relationships felt unpredictable. Some learned to notice every change in someone's voice, every pause, every facial expression, every silence, not because they wanted to, because paying close attention helped them make sense of the world around them. The remarkable thing about the brain is that it remembers what once kept us safe. The difficult part is that it doesn't always realize when life has changed, so it keeps using yesterday's map to navigate today's world. This is why perfectionism can become part of overthinking. It isn't always about wanting everything to be perfect. Sometimes, it's about believing that one small mistake could lead to something much bigger. So the mind checks, then checks again, then wonders if checking one more time might finally make everything feel certain. Fear of regret works in a similar way. The brain quietly says, if I think through every possible outcome, I won't make the wrong choice. But life has never worked that way. No amount of thinking can remove every risk. No decision comes with a guarantee. Yet the mind keeps searching. Not because it's weak. Not because it's broken. Because somewhere along the way, it learned that staying alert was the safest thing to do. And sometimes, the habits that once protected us become the very habits that leave us exhausted. But there's one final piece of the puzzle. If overthinking rarely brings the certainty it's looking for, why does the mind keep returning to it? The answer lies in a trap that almost nobody notices while they're inside it. At first, overthinking doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like the responsible thing to do. After all, what could be wrong with thinking something through one more time? So the mind keeps searching. One more possibility. One more explanation. One more what if. It quietly believes that somewhere, just one thought away, there's an answer that will finally make everything feel certain. But that moment never comes. It's a little like standing in front of a foggy window. You wipe the glass with your hand, hoping to see clearly. For a moment, it works. Then the fog slowly returns. So you wipe it again, then again. The problem isn't that you're wiping the window the wrong way. The problem is that the fog isn't on the glass. It's coming from inside the room. Overthinking works in much the same way. It tries to calm a feeling by creating more thoughts. But feelings don't always become quieter because we think harder. Sometimes they're asking for something that thinking can never provide: complete certainty. The brain is constantly trying to predict what might happen next. Most of the time, it does this so quietly that we never notice. But once the brain starts treating every uncertainty like a possible threat, it never really stops running. One mental simulation becomes another. What if they misunderstood me? What if tomorrow goes badly? What if I've forgotten something important? Then another thought appears. Just think about it one more time. Each question feels reasonable on its own. Together, they become noise. Imagine opening dozens of browser tabs on your computer. Each one seems important. You don't want to close any of them, just in case you need them later. After a while, the computer slows down. Not because one tab is too much, because all of them are competing for the same memory. Overthinking does something similar. It asks the mind to hold on to every possibility, every mistake, every future, all at once. No wonder it feels exhausting. Not because you're weak, not because you're unintelligent, but because your mind is trying to carry more uncertainty than it was ever meant to hold. And that's the trap almost nobody notices. The brain keeps asking for certainty from a life that has never promised it. So it keeps searching, not because it's finding answers, because it still believes the next thought might finally be enough. But if complete certainty doesn't exist, does that mean the mind is doomed to keep searching forever? Or is there another way to understand what it has been trying to do all along? If you've ever wished you could switch your mind off, you're not alone. Most people who think too much aren't enjoying it. They're exhausted by it. They don't lie awake because they want to. They replay conversations because, somewhere deep down, their brain believes there's still something important to find. One more clue, one more answer, one more thought that will finally bring relief. But perhaps relief was never hiding inside another thought. Perhaps that's why it always feels just out of reach. Throughout this documentary, we've been following the same question. Why do some people think so much? The answer isn't that they're weak, or broken, or simply too emotional. More often, their minds are doing exactly what they learned to do: protect, predict, prepare. The problem is that a mind built to protect you can become so busy watching for tomorrow that it forgets to notice that, right now, you're safe. That doesn't mean every fear is imaginary. Life is uncertain. People disappoint us. Plans change. Mistakes happen. The brain isn't wrong about that. It's wrong about one thing. It believes that enough thinking can remove uncertainty completely. But uncertainty isn't a flaw in life. It's part of being alive. Perhaps that's why the calmest people aren't always the ones with all the answers. They're often the ones who have slowly accepted that not every question can be answered today. Not every silence needs an explanation. Not every delayed reply means rejection. Not every mistake becomes a disaster. Not every unknown is a warning. Sometimes, it's simply an unknown. Understanding your mind doesn't mean forcing it to become quiet. It means recognizing what it's been trying to do all along. Because it's much easier to be patient with something once you understand why it's behaving that way. Your thoughts were never trying to become your enemy. They were trying to become your bodyguard. They just forgot that a bodyguard isn't supposed to stay on high alert forever. And perhaps that's the quiet truth behind people who think too much. A noisy mind is rarely the sign of a complicated person. More often, it's the sign of a protective mind that has been working overtime for far too long. Sometimes, the first step towards peace isn't winning the argument inside your head. It's finally understanding why the argument started in the first place. If this documentary helped you understand yourself a little better, subscribe to Project Human. Every week, we explore the hidden psychology behind what makes us human. Until next time, take care.